morning, LinkedIn. How are you this morning? It's got a bit grayer here, which is always a little bit boo. So back with the winter wear, which I'm not mad at, but but this morning I'm joined by the very lovely Katie Murray. Welcome to the Bloody Truth.
Hello. Woo.
We were just admiring our bold lips.
Completely.
And we turned up with matchy bold lip.
I don't think there's anything wrong with a bit of matchy bold lip. I think it's the way forward.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So for anyone that doesn't know Katie, I just don't know how you don't. I mean, you might know her as that HR copywriting lady. That's your.
That's true. Yeah. I might be the HR copy lady. That's possible.
But I'm sure that there's more to the story. Please do share.
So I've also been blamed for HR kind of karate that we did at the HR Big Meet this year. That was sort of my idea. But other people know me as Katie from Katie Jo Copywriting. So used to be an HR professional, still a professional, just not in HR. Perhaps less of a professional than I used to be. And I now spend my time still working with wonderful people in HR, but copywriting for them. So when I say copywriting, I mean writing things like articles and blogs and LinkedIn profiles and websites, and recently focusing on things like thought leadership papers as well. So to kind of do something a bit more juicy.
Yeah. And you're an incredible singer.
And I'm a singer.
Yeah.
And mum.
Yes, and mum. You did an amazing series over, it was Christmas, wasn't it? Where you did that was really fun. I enjoyed that.
I did my 12 days of copywriting, which I sang. And I had to do them all in like single takes for each verse. So it also helped the editing because there kind of wasn't any.
Yeah. I'm sure you can probably still find them on your feed somewhere, but they were well worth a listen and loads of like good top tips. So I wanted you to come on the Bloody Truth because I do think there's a strong crossover in firstly that we talk about language a lot in our sort of relative niches, and how important that is. But also, because, normally I start these conversations with, do you remember your first period? But you wrote an amazing guest blog for me, which was all about flooding and clotting. And I thought it might be actually nice to talk about that for a minute, because it's a conversation that's not really spoken about. And I think flooding is probably, I don't know, one of those fears. I saw the... I don't know if anyone's seen, I think it's Always, the new Always adverts about the period gush moments, like oh my gosh moment. And I think it's kind of like that. And I don't know, I don't think everyone experiences flooding, but you know, there's always the fear that like, when's it going to happen? And it's quite terrifying. Like maybe just in your 40s, you just have to wear period pants all of the time.
It's just really disconcerting. So my periods have never been particularly enjoyable. I don't think anyone's are, but I'm one of those people who's always had really bad cramp associated with it. I don't remember my first period, but I certainly remember rolling around on the floor multiple times when I was in my teenage years because I was just in so much pain. I remember one weekend when I was due to be going to see my mum and dad when I was kind of living in Cheltenham. So I'd have been in my 20s when I literally rang my mum, having managed to crawl from sort of bathroom to bedroom to get back to my phone because I was in so much pain going, I'm not driving anywhere. And then over the years, sort of, I then went on various kind of control things, so pill, coil, kind of combination of different things, different times. but since having my little boy, so he's now 5, there hasn't, we haven't sort of been on anything. And about 6 months after he'd gone to nursery, I was due to be going to pick him up, and I suddenly sat there and went, oh my God. Because everything just suddenly started coming. And I had to send my husband to go and get my little boy. And I was literally sending like group WhatsApp messages to my neighbors going, has anyone got any spare kind of sanitary towels? Who can they, could somebody kind of get me some and bring them round? Because I was going through one about an hour, for about 3 or 4 hours. And it was quite scary, because it came out of nowhere. And it was literally what I would normally have over the course of a week had basically come out in the best part of 5 hours. Because I've kind of said to my husband, right, if this hasn't sort of started to slow down by the time you get home, we're going to have to go to the hospital, because like, this is not good. And it did start to slow down, but that first experience of it, I was like, oh my God, what the hell is happening? Because you sort of, you kind of get this feeling where it's kind of, you sort of know it's coming. And then you sort of, this very awkward sensation, particularly if you start to kind of clot and things like that, because literally the lining's just kind of going and sort of
like
falling out at speed. Right. And you can sort of be sat there and you'll sort of stand up and gravity kind of takes its course, and you're like, oh, okay, I now need to go somewhere. And if you haven't had that experience, and I'll be honest, the only other time I've had that experience was after I'd had a miscarriage. So I had a miscarriage sort of 6-7 years ago now. They had to do an ERPC, which is a kind of surgical procedure in the end. But even after that, for a while, you can, like, your body's still kind of reacting, and it can still kind of, everything kind of goes a bit haywire for a while.
So that's such a like PTSD moment as well.
It was a very, it was kind of, had lots of things kind of going on. But I did at least kind of, in a weird way, I recognized the feeling. Because I sort of went, oh, I'm clotting, like I kind of know that's what's happening. But if you haven't, even without that, this still would have happened to me, because it's happened multiple times since. And it doesn't happen every month, and sometimes it's regular and sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's flooding and sometimes it's not. But I went through a period where I would literally have sanitary towels in my bag the whole time, because I'm like, I just don't know. I don't know if I'm suddenly going to need them. And you'd go out for dinner and you'd be like, okay, I'm going to go home early now. Because, and it was different things that hit me. So there's the kind of physical sensation of the flooding. There's this really intense kind of metallic smell, which I know I wrote about in the blog. And that's just because everything's happening so quickly that kind of, that's a natural thing that happens to your body in terms of what's going on. But you just sort of go, I feel like, it sounds like a really weird thing, I feel like I can smell spoons.
Okay.
Like, that thought that went through my head. I was like, why can I, like, it was sort of like that. And I think it's always like, sometimes you get like a weird metallic taste if you've got a bit of a cold or something. You sort of like, when you speak, that's why I think that's why it smelled like spoons to me.
I do know exactly what you mean, or like 2 peas or something. Like it's just that metallic-y smell. It smells.
But it was quite sort of, it's really quite intense.
And before like the flooding happens.
So no, just like as so as soon as you kind of, if you go
Okay.
into the bathroom, as soon as you're just like, oh, I can just smell it, and then you almost like carry it with you because you kind of know it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's it's so there's kind of that, and then there's this kind of mental bit that goes on in your head going, when's it going to happen next? Is it going to happen again? Is
Yeah.
that a one-off? Is that going to, like, is that what this is now? And it's,
So many
so
questions that happen
it's
at the same
really
time.
disconcerting.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And yeah, I was going to say, like, so it was completely there's no way, no pattern. It's not predictable, and sometimes it happens.
Certainly it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So
But it only happened within your period, not outside of like when you would have normally expected your period,
well, that's a very hard question to answer
because they were irregular.
because they're irregular. So even before my little boy was born, I could go from 18 days 1 month to 32 the following.
Okay.
So there isn't a consistent pattern. For me, my pattern is more around some of the other kind of hormonal impacts that you'll feel. So I normally get 2 days, like a month, where my head is absolutely banging, and it doesn't matter what I take, it's just banging. So it was more kind of, I knew from those symptoms that it might be about to happen rather than anything else.
It's interesting when you start to become curious, I think, about your different markers. I mean, they're called the things like our basal body temperature, that's our temperature at rest and things, and cervix position, and they're all called like biomarkers. But actually, once you get in tune with your own sort of patterns, you'll notice, like, some people say that they get really sore legs just before their period, or a sore back, or like loads of different things. I always get a headache before, and you'll just know them, and then you might know a few key ones, but when you actually start trying to track things, I think more show up as well, and you can kind of just about judge, I think. Did you get to a point where you knew enough of those markers for you that you could kind of catch it, or did it?
Yeah, to a degree. So I think, you'd sort of notice, like, there might be just a teeny tiny bit 1 or 2 days before, and things like that, and of sort of spotting. And I think the hardest thing for me is because of the amount of pain that I used to have when I was a kid, and sort of all the way through. So I didn't stop taking sort of a contraceptive pill or alternative until I was well into my 30s. So I'd been taking them for kind of 17-ish years, something like that. Might be a bit longer. Can't remember when I first started taking them. I didn't really know what my cycle was because it had always been effectively chemically controlled. And therefore I didn't really know what my markers were either, because I'd never kind of tracked them myself. It had all just kind of come along with the created cycle that I ended up on. So I think for me, part of it was, because we had some challenges conceiving and stuff like that, which again, that sort of makes things inconsistent around, cycles, and when you come off the pill or you come off the coil, it takes a while for everything to settle down. And so it wasn't really until after I'd had Aiden that I properly started to even understand what my actual cycle was. So it was quite late to try and then go, oh, right, what does this look like? And then you start going, well, shit, am I in perimenopause? Am I have I just like skipped this whole bit and gone into the bit where it's just wild anyway?
because for you it wasn't actually connected to perimenopause. I know it can happen a lot, like during perimenopause, but at that time for you it wasn't part of your perimenopause, was it?
No, it was just my body going. And stress has a lot to do with it. So if you're under a lot of stress, then again your body can just go, no, and release. And stuff like that. It is a little bit crazy.
I mean, stress is like the biggest disruptor, I think, in cycle regularity, because when we're stressed, and that sends cortisol and adrenaline going, the one thing that our body does is it shuts down anything unnecessary.
Yeah.
So that could be anything to do with reproduction. So can stop cycles, can make them shorter, can make them longer. That sort of disruption around it does play havoc with our hormonal cycles, and not just doesn't have to just be kind of like work stress. It could be because your nervous system's under stress. So it could be like severe illness, over-exercising, under-eating, like a combination of the two, like where we're putting stress on our body. So
having a toddler will also do that to you. Having children will do that to you.
100%.
Yeah, all of those, caring for parents, if you've got, or if you've got kind of other people, or if there's things around like, partner's job that makes life stressful, like all of those things contribute to you. And I think if you sort of know what your markers are, you can probably navigate a bit of that, because you probably also know how you are going to react to some of those things. Because that was one of the other things was, all of a sudden I'm kind of like, everything's just going, and my hormones inside are going, I don't know what to do now. And getting used to actually how my body reacted, like the rest of my body reacted to that, took some time. And helping my husband to understand how my body was going to react to that took some time. And and sort of going, okay, now is not a day for kind of doing lots of running around with the little one, and kind of like all of those bits and pieces. You've suddenly got to kind of navigate all of that, and each person who goes through it will have a different experience of that, depending on how their life is and kind of what their particular stresses are. But like I say, if you're like me, where you've been on some sort of medication for a long time, even if it's you're not necessarily kind of thinking about kids, or anything like that, but actually you've gone, no, I don't want to do that anymore. It's just recognizing that it will take some time to settle, and that you may go through some of these waves of actually, you might find that you do kind of flood and clot and stuff if you are particularly stressed, particularly kind of upset about something, or because your body is just trying to work itself out, having been so tightly controlled for such a long period of time.
It's interesting. I had 3 rounds of the coil. I was on the pill for a while, and then I had 3 rounds of the coil. I didn't have a period for 15 years. I stopped taking the coil, and the next month my period arrived as if nothing had happened. Like, if it can go either way. And I think it's good to sort of be aware of these things, the different scenarios that can play out, and that it does, like you say, take time for your body to adjust. But also, if you are a person and you are experiencing a time of stress, I mean, we can do all the planning that we want, but sometimes life gets lifey, and we just have to deal reactively with what's in front of us, and can't help the stress our body's under. But like you were saying, we don't have to like layer on. I mean, even in a scenario where you have lots of responsibilities or people dependent on you, I bet there's like at least one thing that you can be like, okay, this doesn't need to be done today. The washing can wait till tomorrow, or something, just to give a little pocket of less to look after yourself. And I think, can also be in the world we are, where I think we're largely disconnected from our body and our mind, but it's nothing works in isolation. It's it's a holistic system. And I think sometimes we forget, if we're under stress, that, now my menstrual cycle's a bit weird or wonky, and it takes a while to sometimes put the two together. But your body's love language is the symptoms and signals it gives you, and it's trying to tell you a thing. And so when you get a scenario like that, your body was trying to say, it's doing a thing, and we just need to kind of figure out what it is. But it's not that it doesn't happen in isolation from other things going on in your life. And it can be delayed because, for example, around ovulation, the egg that is released from the follicle at ovulation goes on a 90-day journey to get there. So something that happened 3 months ago can cause an irregular period, 3 months later. So when my cat passed away last year, 3 months later, I got this crazy wild cycle. And it took me a second. I was like, 3 months ago. And I was like, oh yeah. And it's true, because it disrupted that journey, that 90-day race to ovulation. And so those things, they impact us. It might not be immediately, can be later, but our body is always trying to talk to us, I think.
It massively is. And I think it's the thing that I've got better at is, like you say, kind of recognizing when you need to take a step back. So I can now sort of sense those days coming up where I'm like, it's going to have to be a quieter day at home, because actually, even though I'm now better at managing the physical kind of shifts that might be happening, your energy level just absolutely goes through the floor if your body's trying to process that. So I'm like, it's probably a play in the garden, do some Lego, do a puzzle kind of day. It's, not a day for going to a wildlife park or like, I'm not in for like running around and seeing the ducks today.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And this is why, and I think, and this is our little plot twist, is why, firstly, it's really important to have this conversation out loud, because I think that aspect of that flooding isn't really spoken about, and there's a lot of like fear around it. But it's good to know from your lived experience of it, that there are those markers that you were able to kind of decipher after a couple of times, a little bit about, the signals that your body was giving you, so that you could catch it. Because I think there is a lot of fear around that, just being like in, Tesco's one day, and then, which, hopefully is not the first time if that ever happens to me. Well, I hate going to the supermarket anyway. That's what home delivery's for. But
I was going to say, that's what online shopping's for, isn't it?
I was like, I don't know why I chose that. I hate, it's a sensory no for me.
But it is that idea of going around, like kind of, is it going to happen while I'm in the middle of doing something? The weird thing is that actually most of the time when it has happened to me, I've actually been at home.
Yeah. Okay.
Or it's and I don't know if it's almost that kind of, that's been when my body's almost kind of relaxed enough to actually kind of go, okay, I can process this now. But a lot of the time it's been at home, or kind of when I'm very near home, that it's actually happened. It hasn't often been like really in, like, I can only think of one time when it's been really intense that I haven't actually been at the house.
Yeah, that's interesting, because like 9 times out of 10 I will come on my period while I'm asleep, like during the night. And I do wonder if that, like you say, it's that like where your body's relaxed, and it's just because it's not prioritizing anything else. And so and
I'm not saying that's going to be everyone's experience at all, but I think you can also, like say, I counteracted it by making sure that I had plenty of stuff in my bag, that if I needed it, it was there for a while, and and that kind of thing. So now that there are period pants, do you think that you might have just worn precautionary pants? I don't know that I would, to be honest. Like, I'm kind of like, I'll just, I don't know. I think maybe I would. I've not really thought about it, is the honest answer to that.
I think if I was going to be like up on stage, I might wear precautionary pants.
I mean, I think that's valid. I can go with that.
There's not many scenarios, but like that being
No.
on stage.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when it happened while sort of after the miscarriage and things, I was actually giving a choral performance. So I used to sing in the choir in London, and a couple of the ladies there were just absolutely amazing, so supportive. And we upset a few people by having to move them around so that I could be on the end of the row. Because I don't know if you've ever sung in a choir, but sometimes some of the members can be quite particular about where they want to be.
Okay.
And
I can kind of get that.
We moved a few around, which meant that they had to be on the inside so that I could be on the outside. But it was so that if I needed to get out, I could just get out.
Yeah.
And at one point I was like, okay, I've got to go now. No, like, that's fine, just go. You know,
Yeah.
Having the support around, and again, that kind of comes into the conversation we're sort of about to have around, you know, having those conversations and talking to the right people. You know, the two people that I spoke to, and there were only two in the room who knew, were so incredible and so supportive. And similarly, when it happened at home, like, you know, I sent a message to two people. One was, you know, well, it was kind of four, because one was a group chat to the three people who are kind of closest to me in the street, and the other one was actually to my little one's kind of nursery teacher, going, might be a bit later today because I've got this issue, and I'm hoping that Ewan can come and get him, but you know, it might depend on when he can get a call. She's like, that's fine, that's no problem, don't worry, are you okay? And I think being able to have conversations with people about it is a new thing. Like, that's not something that, I mean, I used to have the conversation with my mum when I was younger, but that was kind of it. Like, you didn't really have a broader conversation about it. Whereas, you know, I've now got, you know, other members of the family where, you know, polyps are not uncommon in our family. You know, we've got members of the family who have just been diagnosed with endometriosis.
Gosh.
You know, these are, and that's a tough one to wrap your head around and be able to support when you haven't experienced it. And it's a tough one to live through, right? Like, she's doing great, but not everyone has that support, and not everyone has the right people around them. But when you can find them, it makes a massive difference, because you can just release some of that stress and that pressure around it.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think this is, you know, first, I think language really helps. And I talk about this a lot, and in the context of being at work as well. I think we need to actively move away from, you know, being like, oh, that time of the month, and kind of skirting around things, because when we use like weird euphemisms and, you know, sort of skirt around the subject, and we can't just say my period, that creates this taboo around it. Like, somehow, for some reason, you can't talk about it, or it's, you know, that it shouldn't be talked about, and no one's really saying the thing that they really mean. But if you're in a workplace situation, it's really important. If you're experiencing something like that, you need to be able to say, my periods are really bad, and sometimes I experience flooding. Like, can my desk be near the door? You know, can I, you know, can I work, you know, can work be a bit more flexible today? Can I work from home for the morning because I've got a feeling like, and I don't want to be in the office? We need to be able to say what it is. And I think from a sort of a top down, sort of managers and leaders need to be okay with saying the word period and stuff like flooding out loud, because there are going to be staff members that experience that.
I think so. I've spent a lot of my career in HR teams, right? Predominantly female, you know, female dominated spaces in a lot of cases. Not exclusively female, you know, I've had kind of male managers at various different points, and male directors. Let's not get into that debate. I've also had female directors. But even within an all women space, we don't talk about it. We're not open about it. You know, we don't share those experiences because, oh, well, that's a bit too personal. And actually, you know, being able to talk about it is massive. And I think, you know, it's about kind of, it's about talking about all aspects of periods and activities, and not, you know, not just exclusively. Like the number of people I've had who I know have had issues, you know, where they've tried to talk about it and actually the understanding hasn't been there, and you're trying to support it, but with a manager who kind of goes, oh, I don't really want to talk about that, it's a bit awkward. And it's like, okay, but if this was you and you had, you know, and it's very hard to say, you know, a similar experience for a guy, because they don't have this kind of monthly cycle in the sense of they don't recognize it as a monthly cycle. But if you sort of said to them, yeah, but if, you know, if once a month you kind of, you know, had a terrible pain in your knee that meant you couldn't walk anywhere, like you'd want us to support that and kind of help you to work around that and have some flexibility, right? And I think part of it is because it's quite hard for us to be able to give an equivalent, particularly within a male management scenario, that it then kind of gets ignored and it gets sort of, oh, well, you know, we don't really need to worry about that, she'll figure it out. And it's like, no, she's not going to figure it out. She needs some help to figure it out because we need to support that.
Yeah, exactly that.
Which is you know, it is a conversation that people don't have, and we need to be having it more.
Yeah. Just as like we would say anything else, you know, oh, do you know, I've got a really bad cold or something, or some reoccurring thing, or it could be any other sort of chronic condition is fully acknowledged. Mental health is fully acknowledged and talked about and accepted. And menstrual health is the same. I think it's just that it involves blood. I think that is literally what it is. It involves blood. So somehow that is like a little bit weird and taboo, and we don't really know what to do with that information, you know.
I think that mental health, I think, has shifted as well, because certainly when I started in HR, there was a lot more around, oh, you know, oh, he's, and I don't say this in a sense of I believe it, but people kind of go, oh, they're playing the ADHD card. It was, oh, they're playing the depression card. No, that's not what it is. Like, this is somebody who has a very specific, you know, situation, condition, diagnosis, in, you know, or any or all of those could apply depending on what the circumstances are. And we need to look at the best way to support that. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't get some people who will milk certain scenarios for all they are worth, but they are typically the exception. They're not the rule.
Yeah, 100%.
It shouldn't stop us talking about things in the meantime. And from the people that I know who experience, you know, it could be endometriosis. It could also be fibromyalgia, right? That's something which more than it's not just a female specific issue.
Nope.
Right? Getting someone to understand that is incredibly hard. Getting somebody to actually understand what that looks and feels like on a day-to-day basis is incredibly hard. But yet we talk about that because it's something which is applicable across everybody. I think sometimes as soon as you get into female specific spaces, people go, oh, well, we don't want to talk about it because that's private. No, it's not bloody private. You know, there are aspects of it that sure might be, but actually it's not. It's something which is common to literally half the population.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be the full, you know, guts and gore story.
No.
It just needs to be enough to be able to say, you know, something like, you know, my periods are causing terrible flooding at the moment, or debilitating cramping, and I just need XYZ to help me. And it just needs to be really simple like that. But to your point that you were saying about, people's, they're playing this card or that card. I've heard people say similar things, or stories about people saying, similar things in terms of, oh, yeah, I know that they've got XYZ, but I'm not being funny or anything, but they've still got to do their job. And it's really frustrating because, yes, that is true, but it's why we now sort of try to bake in equity over equality, because the accommodations or adjustments aren't a better deal for someone. They just level a playing field to enable people to do their job. So it's not like, oh, I'm not being funny, but they still need to get on. Yes, but give them the right scenario to allow them to do that, which might look like, I guess, if you're not in a scenario where you're experiencing the debilitating chronic pain, it might feel like an addition to what you might need, but to that person it's the bare minimum of what they need. And I think that's the difference. A better yet than accommodations is more thoughtful workplace design, but that's like a whole other battle.
But I think that's I mean, it takes the conversation far beyond menstrual cycles and things like that. But that design of the workplace is huge, because actually I think what people are starting to recognize is there isn't a one size fits all. There isn't, and it's not about, and I know the technical term is reasonable adjustments, accommodation. All of that feels like you're kind of pandering to something. And I think people get frustrated by that approach. If you actually sit there and go, okay, but you've got a bad back, so you need a back cushion to give it support. Your thing is that you can still be in the office, but actually you probably need to get up and walk around a bit more than other people. Other people need to stand up because it's more effective for them. Other people need to be near a window, away from a window, in a quieter space, in a louder space, able to put their headphones in. Like, it's not about accommodations, it's about finding the best ways of working for everybody. And that, for some people, that is once a month for a couple of days. They need a slightly different kind of way of doing things. For other people, it's every day. They need their way of doing things. For parents, it's on a Friday. I've got, so this Friday, I've got the Easter bonnet parade. It's only going to be for 10 minutes. But if I was trying to get back to a regular job, then I would be slightly later than normal, right? So although they've kind of done it first thing in the morning, and they've done it as soon as we kind of drop off, and they're literally going to line the kids up and all of that, by the time we actually get out, you're late for work, right? Now, some people will recognize that, other people won't. But that broader sense of, actually, we need to drive different workplaces because that design needs to work to make everybody effective, is a very important conversation that's starting, and it's going to take a while to pull through.
Yeah. I know a lot of your work is talking about saying the right thing to the right person, and I know in terms of copywriting that we're speaking to the right person to get the right ask, to go to the right place.
Yeah.
But I think it's equally the same thing when you're in a workplace situation, or you want to go and ask for support. I mean, hopefully you're in a workplace that as said, we want to have these conversations, and they're open to having those conversations, so you feel comfortable to do that in the workplace. But that's equally important, I think, that you are establishing that conversation with, like you said, someone that you trust. Like, you had people in your circle of friends and people that you trusted, that you could have that conversation with. I mean, even if it's like a trusted manager or colleague or just someone, I think that's equally important there as well, having the right conversation with the right person.
Yeah, but I think it's also about allowing yourself to be a little bit vulnerable sometimes, and that's scary, right? But when, and I kind of take this back to when I had a miscarriage, because that was when I was employed. So when I had a miscarriage, I was off work for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
For, you know, both emotional reasons and physical reasons, combination of both, right? And I went back into work, and obviously my manager kind of knew what was happening. Several in the team kind of knew what was happening. But the managers that I was working with hadn't really been told anything. Fair enough, respected my privacy, totally get that. Sat in a meeting, had a you know, having a conversation with one of the managers. And I'd worked with him for a couple of years, and he sort of said, "Oh, you know, oh, did you have a good break?"
Oh.
Because he didn't know. He just thought I was on holiday.
Right.
And I turned around and went, "Actually, no, because I had a miscarriage and I was recovering from that." And I think for a lot of people, and you know, we then had quite an open conversation about it. He was very supportive. You know, sort of, "Oh, you know, didn't realize." And I was like, "That's fine." I said, "But you know," I said, I'm quite happy that if you're talking to other people, that you sort of say, actually, I've kind of had some stuff going on, because we don't talk about that stuff." And just knowing that I could say that to him and go, "Actually, no, it was this."
Yeah.
Almost gave me some power back over what was happening, and gave me some control over what that narrative was and kind of how that conversation happened. So that the next time we had a conversation, he was like, "Hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
You know, how are things?" And there were a couple of other people who I know, kind of because of some of the meetings that he was in, you know, something came up about it, because their reaction to me when they came in was then very different. So they obviously kind of knew that he'd sort of said something, going, "Oh, you know, by the way, she wasn't on holiday. She's had some, you know, she's had some crap to deal with." So it actually made dealing with that whole situation a lot easier. And I think when we can be upfront, so if somebody sort of says, oh, were you off yesterday? On the days when you have to go, "Actually, I was, and I was, you know, or I was working from home because I was having to manage the pain that I was in," it starts to make it a more open conversation. And we've done the same with mental health. We've opened it up gradually, and over time, people have become more aware of it. They've become more understanding of it. We're not there, but we are leaps and bounds from where we were 20 years ago when I started my career. We are doing the same when it comes to menstrual education. You know, growing up in school now, kids talk about having penises and vaginas. They don't talk about, "Oh, I've got a willy," or "I've got a foo-foo," or whatever the hell you might want to go, like, I don't even know. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, but they are encouraged to use the, you know, and I know
Right
that
terminology.
actually the right technical term, but they are encouraged to use the biological terms, because partly because we've actually got better at talking about that stuff, and we want it to be more normal as a conversation and accepted as a conversation, and partly because people have become more aware of other issues that happen later in life, that if you can't then talk about those situations, it makes, you know, it makes things like assault a lot harder to actually uncover and stuff like that. But being able to use the right term, you know, I mean, I was in fits of laughter when my kid, at a fairly young age, because he's only 5 now, was talking to me about his testicles. Like, he was spot on, but it wasn't what I was expecting to come out of his mouth.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Yeah, but actually the thing that is good about that is that that's what he's being taught.
Yeah.
And So actually, as he grows up, having those conversations becomes something that just happens.
Yes, and this is what we need. I mean, we will get there, I think, in the workplace. I mean, it will take probably Gen Z to be in the C-suite before it does, but we're getting there. We're doing a lot of like background work before that happens, I think.
It also takes people like you, me, and people who are not that, kind of not that much younger than us, confidently walking to the toilet with a sanitary towel in your hand.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to stuff it up my jumper, or like stick it up my sleeve, or take my bag with me. Just take the damn thing that you need.
Yeah.
And actually just make that. It's a really simple change.
Yeah.
But just doing that, and I found myself doing it actually sort of since I've got to know you. If I'm in a restaurant, or if I'm doing something and I'm kind of like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom, and and I'm kind of with other people, and I can just sort of leave my stuff where it is, right? Then I'm like, oh, I'm just going to grab that and I'll go, and I'll just kind of be walking around with a sanitary towel in my hand, because, well, why wouldn't I? It's just, like, okay, I'm going through a kind of normal part of life, and that's something that now needs to happen. I want to make sure that I'm fresh and clean and comfortable.
Yeah.
Like, so it's things like that. It's the simple little bits that feel really jarring when you first do them. You're like, oh my God, I'm walking across the restaurant and I've got a sanitary towel in my hand. Oh, people are gonna, nobody gives a shit.
No, that's just our like shame and taboo of the 90s, but we grew up with that.
If we all start doing it, then
it's just normal. Then
it's what happens. It's women get up and they take what they need and they go into the bathroom, and then they go and do the thing, and then they come back. And as the younger generation then comes through, and I've got nieces who are kind of teenagers and stuff, I want them to be able to go, I need to go and do that.
Yeah. And it's not, yeah, and it's not like shock in a way of shock tactics or anything like that, because the messaging was when we were younger, it's not a thing to discuss in polite company, but it isn't. I've told this story the other week. I put my invoice into long story, but I still teach a chair yoga class as a little bit of a leftover remnant from my original sort of self-employment, doing yoga teaching. And anyway, so I teach a chair yoga class at a local church hall, and the treasurer wouldn't accept my invoice because it said menstrual wise on it, and they asked for a different invoice without that word on it. And I'm like, wow. I mean, that's what we're fighting. So it's and I didn't put it in there to be. It's just the name of my company, my business. So it's not to do.
That is actually who's provided the service. So
yeah. And it's not to be inappropriate. It's just because it's just regular life stuff that happens, and we need to be able to talk about it without euphemisms, weird ways of saying it, skirting around the edges of it, because otherwise people suffer in silence, and that's what we want to avoid. Ideally, is where people feel supported and safe in their workplace.
Absolutely. And there's so much to be said for that, and this is a conversation I know we could keep having, but
yes,
it's that I think there is something about finding a person or a couple of people that you do feel you can have a conversation with, because the more that we can start to talk about it and share our experiences, the better. And it is, like I say, it's doing those little things of going, I'm going to take my lippy, and I'm going to take my my kind of pad with me, and then that'll be that.
Simple as.
Oh my goodness,
we could go on for so much more. I know. thank you so much for sharing your story and for coming on and having this conversation about bloody card conversations. How can people get hold of you? Is there anything that you're working on that you wanted to share, or anything we didn't get to cover?
How can people get hold of me? So you can find me on LinkedIn under Katie Jo Copywriter HR. You can find me on my website, katiejocopywriting.co.uk. And in terms of what I'm working on, it's about people who want to have these sorts of conversations. So not necessarily about menstrual health or kind of awareness and sort of cycles and stuff, but people who want to lead that conversation. Those are the people that I want to talk to right now. Is what should we be talking about that we're not talking about? Because that's what I want to build with the brands that I'm working with. Is let's be those thought leaders. Let me help you be a leader in your space where you actually are challenging some of that, where you're talking about some of the things that we know need to be covered that aren't being. And let's start, getting you out there as a voice that we're doing that.
Yes, get in touch with Katie, and she's just the most lovely human being ever.
Oh, thank you.
And I've had the privilege to meet you in live quite a few times now.
Ooh.
Just as lovely. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening, everyone, or for anyone that catches up on the replay, and I will see you next time.
Thank you for having me.